Welcome to What the Hype, and put on your deodorant and stitch together a cosplay, because this week we are discussing the hype around pop culture conventions. Micah, Pam, and Eric are here this week. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Hi.
All four of us have spent a lot of time at pop culture conventions, so I'm very excited to discuss this with you today. And by the way, by bringing up deodorant, I'm not making any comment about how y'all treat yourselves. You all always smell great.
Well,
Good to know.
Okay. That said, if you're waiting in line at a convention, it's always wonderful to not be that person who did not put on you.
Maybe use a little aluminum. It's not going to hurt you for a few days.
Yes, exactly. Before we get started, don't forget to follow us online everywhere. Hit follow and subscribe in your favorite podcast and social media apps. You can do that by just searching for What the Hype on all your favorite platforms, and visit whatthehypepodcast.com for more about the show and to find a full list of social links and episodes. Speaking of episodes, full video episodes are available on YouTube at What the Hype Podcast. Again, just give that a search. This week, I wanted to talk about pop culture conventions because New York Comic-Con is happening this weekend. So
nice.
We thought it would be a good time to chat about fan events. Let's go around the table. How many conventions has each of us been to? Pam.
Okay, so I've been to San Diego Comic-Con about 7 times and WonderCon 5 times, and I've been to 2 Harry Potter fan conventions. I guess you would classify them. I forgot that they had official ones until I saw your count.
They did, and then they got rid of them. But
because they realized they couldn't compete with the fan ones.
I guess.
So I've been to New York Comic Con once, Indie Pop Con once, and Harry Potter. I tried counting. Honestly, I feel like I'm in the same range as you, Andrew, which is probably somewhere around 10 or so.
Yeah.
If you add them all up. So
it's hard to figure out how many conventions exactly you've been to, if you've been to a lot of them. Yeah. With us and Harry Potter, I think we've lost track a while ago.
Yeah, the only way I am able to come close is I happen to be consolidating like all of my photographs off old hard drives from like 2008 to present, roughly around the time I started going to conventions. So I have a general number, and it's close to 40. It might be over 40 conventions, because Chicago has 2 big ones every year. It's Fan Expos now, what it's called, but it used to be called Wizard World. And also C2E2, Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo. One is in April and one is in like July. And for many years, I would hit both of those in addition to whatever Harry Potter conference was going on that year, which most years there is one. And some other ones, some fun outliers, but that's been the source of it. Still, looking back, it's still a very high number.
Yeah, and I think you take the lead, Eric. I've been to, I think, 9 San Diego Comic-Cons, 3 or 4 D23s, which is the official Disney Expo, usually in Anaheim. Yeah. 10 or so Harry Potter fan cons, 1 or 2 Harry Potter official conventions. I feel like 8 birds are singing, 5 golden rings.
Yeah. Well, I'll say
one
even
Star Wars
one San
celebration.
Diego Comic-Con probably counts for 5 other ones, because that's the biggest convention.
Yeah,
It is.
That is
huge.
the
Pretty big
insane.
time.
I can't. Pam, you survived 7 times. Did you say you've been at 9 times?
Yeah, and I've probably gained 7 years.
Or lost 7 years. Yeah.
Or lost 7 years of my life.
Yeah, but no, I'm too intimidated for that. And in fact, New York Comic Con, which I've been to once, is like the next biggest thing. It's a Reed Pop event.
I've always wanted to go to that one. Not to cut Andrew off from his long list of conventions.
Oh, are you still going, Andrew?
Well, the only other one I wanted to add was Star Wars Celebration, the official Star Wars convention.
And I wanted
I've been
you to get that
twice.
one in because I'm very jealous you've gone to that. Those looked so
I
cool.
did the one in Chicago. I saw Mikey B. It was wonderful.
have you seen Star Wars, Andrew?
Yes, I've seen. Well, okay, look, I got invited to go, so I'm not going to say no to that. Yeah, I'll take a press pass to Star Wars Celebration.
Have you seen Star Wars when
it's like
you went?
when you stole the extra lightsaber from the Comic-Con panel.
Oh, that's a good Comic-Con story. Yeah,
make sure you bring that up later.
Okay, I'll make a note of it now. But yeah, Eric, you mentioned being intimidated by San Diego Comic-Con. I feel where you're coming from, but I think to anybody listening, if you've been thinking about San Diego Comic-Con, if it's been on your bucket list, just go for it. Yeah, it's crazy, but I think you'll be glad you did.
I disagree. That's not a start. That's nobody's
Eric?
Primer. That's nobody's starter. That's like playing with fire by dousing yourself in lighter fluid. I mean, it just absolutely does not. It doesn't. You can tell why I haven't been to San Diego Comic-Con. Not only am I a little intimidated by it, but I don't have a lot of
deodorant.
I don't have enough deodorant. Thank you, Micah, for the save. That was impeccable. But yeah, I have a little bit of a takedown of SDCC further down in the plan of the doc. But it really, there are conventions near you. There are so many these days, geeky and nerdy conventions, that I feel like something not as restrictive, intimidating, and expensive as SDCC. Just even thinking about in terms of hotel fare.
Well, the hotel issue is a nightmare over there. I'll give you that, because it's not just the price; it's even being able to get one at all. It's like they almost don't have enough room for the number of tickets they sell, which is a whole another issue. But to that point, Eric, I started going to WonderCon when it was still in San Francisco, and it was such a smaller deal than before they moved it over to Anaheim. And even the first few years it was in Anaheim, it was much smaller than it is now. It's almost like a baby San Diego Comic-Con at this point. They're bringing in a lot more of the TV shows, some of the movies. It's not as big, but it's kind of like, it's a good training ground if you're looking for something that's like bigger than your hometown con, and not as big as San Diego Comic-Con will be.
I will say, just looking through this list, it does bring up a lot of good memories. The HP official, Andrew, is that the event we went to in Orlando?
Yeah,
together?
That's my rough note. A celebration of Harry Potter, I think it is officially called. Yeah, we went
more
there.
More of an expo than a convention, but okay, I'll let it go.
That's true. That's true. But I don't know. It's a fan gathering. Everybody's united around one subject.
I don't want to split hairs, because some of mine might have been expos too. So it's probably against my best interest.
A key difference is that a celebration of Harry Potter did not have fan panels. And I do believe that is one key element of a pop culture convention, or a good one.
I agree with you there. But Micah, I mean, mentioning memories, some of the places I've traveled to have only existed because, or I've only gone there because of these conventions existing. I really don't know how I would have ever gotten to San Francisco or Portland, Oregon, or Boston, Massachusetts. These were not places I ever had family in. Even, the amount of times we've all been to like Orlando, Florida is 10 or 12 times more than I ever would have considered going, all because of conventions.
Eric, what a great transition though, because I was going to ask if everybody had a favorite location for a convention, either that they've been to or they've thought in their mind, hey, this would be a great place for a convention.
Facebook reminded me that I think it's 6 years ago, we were in Salem, Massachusetts, going around and seeing the sights.
LeakyCon Boston, right?
I love San Diego, even though San Diego Comic-Con is hectic. The convention center sits right on the bay. Very walkable area. The Gaslamp District is lots of bars there. Yes, the hotel booking situation is a nightmare, but a lot of great hotels there as well. I just love California and San Diego, so that's probably my favorite. I don't think a convention has otherwise brought me anywhere I hadn't been or wouldn't have gone otherwise, I think, especially now. Like, sure, some conventions may have been my first introduction to, let's say, Portland, maybe even, no, not Orlando.
Dallas.
But do you want to visit Dallas? With peace and love to everybody in Texas.
That wasn't very peaceful or loving.
Hey, I love Austin, Texas. Dallas, I don't know if I need to visit.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I'm going with San Diego.
I just like the fact that, especially if it's a city I haven't been to before, the fact that you get the opportunity not just to go to the convention, but to explore the city. And I think that's something that's really cool about conventions. And most of the time you're doing it with friends. You're doing it with people that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do something like this with. And I think about all of the places, thankfully, that we've all been able to go together because of MuggleCast. No one city really sticks out to me, though.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd have to go with San Diego too. I mean, I have family out in San Diego further south than the gas lamp, but it's so fun. I have such good memories of going for Comic-Con, whether it was like before when I just went for fun or after when like Andrew and I were covering for quite a few years there for Hypable. And like you were saying, it's just so walkable and everything's right there. A lot of times these convention centers kind of sit really far away from the downtown area. So I feel like that makes Comic-Con in San Diego at least really unique because it is right in the middle of like the big downtown nightlife area. So yeah, it's a great location.
Yeah. Well, I did a little research on the history of pop culture conventions, and believe it or not, the first known pop culture convention occurred in 1939 in New York City. It was called WorldCon, or the World Science Fiction Convention. And as its name implies, it was dedicated to science fiction literature. And then comic book conventions began happening in the 60s, and San Diego Comic-Con, regarded, as we've been discussing, as the biggest pop culture convention in the world today, was founded in 1970. And then, of course, today there are many, many more conventions covering all different types of genres and subjects. Another big one, Dragon Con, premiered in 1987. Anime Expo arrived in 1992. And BlizzCon premiered in 2005. And BlizzCon is a convention for fans of Blizzard Entertainment, meaning World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, Overwatch, all of those. So if there's a fan base for something, there is a convention to back them up. What do we individually like about pop culture conventions? I think for me, and San Diego Comic-Con is going to come up a lot today, that was probably my first major, well, outside of Lumos 2006, San Diego Comic-Con was my first big pop culture convention. And just seeing fans so passionate and excited about big news being revealed at SDCC in particular always revved me up. Like Hall H, which is the biggest venue at San Diego Comic-Con, a lot of major stars and panels have appeared there. And Marvel, of course, has announced a lot of news in Hall H over the years. And when that happens, that room is electric. It is a rock and roll concert times 100. Like the fans are just so excited. So for me, it's really just all about the excitement that you see from people at these.
For me, it kind of goes off of that. It's seeing people nerd out and being authentically themselves. And I think if you're ever walking around any fan convention, it doesn't matter if it's a San Diego Comic-Con or it's something that's smaller and more localized, you always see people dressed up. And the fact that people take the time to put in that amount of effort to represent either their favorite show, their favorite movie, their favorite character, to me has always just shown something special. Like it's very cool to be able, for me anyway, to be able to see that.
Yeah.
And, I think probably at one point in time, and maybe even still today, there's a stigma associated with that, right? Like, haha, you're getting dressed up and you're going to a convention. I think I've seen like the late night TV shows still kind of dig and make fun of that. I'm thinking of Conan O'Brien back in the day, but Conan seems like a con goer himself anyway. So
he has a show every year at Comic-Con, or he
There
did
you
used
go.
to. Yeah.
I think, and this is sort of a discussion for another time, I think, but there used to be a stigma around being a fan of things, and I think celebrating fandoms has become cool. So while you still see a lot of major nerds, like classic nerds, if you will, at these pop culture conventions, they're less
Classic
frowned
nerds.
upon than they once were. Yeah.
Honestly, it's almost like you can't be nerdy enough. And I know that this is like, I hate to bring this up when we're talking like, you know, giving flowers to the conventions that we love, but like, especially unfortunately, if you're a woman who likes to go to pop culture conventions, a lot of times some of these like bigger fans, unfortunately, most of the time they're men, they just feel like they have a superiority over you, you know, or like they want to test your knowledge. They want to know why you're in the line that you're in. And I think that like, in some ways, like I understand why people that have been going to these things before they were cool feel like they want to gatekeep those spaces. But on the other hand, like it's not fair to like other people because you should be able to just like go and exist and have fun and like nerd out regardless of, you know, your gender or like how long you've been a fan of something. I think it's important to keep those gates open for other fans to come in and nerd out.
Pam, what do you like about fan conventions?
I really love like seeing how passionate people are. I think it's like, it really is like a showcase of love. I'm a like big pop culture fan in general. And, even if I'm there to like work, for example, it's not lost on me that like, so much of like what I do in my career is a result of my lifelong love for pop culture and like a lot of like nerd culture as well. So it's great to see all of these people converging together in one place. And you're all there because you love the same thing. And I think that that's really beautiful.
Something that also just struck me is pop culture conventions are an escape for a lot of people, similar to how MuggleCast feels like an escape to a lot of listeners from the Muggle world. Pop culture conventions are a chance to separate yourself from all the boring crap that's happening in your everyday life and just be surrounded by what we've been talking about. The passion, the stars, being able to connect with fellow fans. Something I see a lot of at the end of conventions, people will post on social media, back to reality. People love going to these conventions to escape. It's such a different world from your, you know, hometown life.
Yeah, like where else are you going to see like Totoro and Pikachu holding hands walking down the
just in my
Expo
dreams,
Center.
Pam. Only in my
Exactly.
dreams. Otherwise, yeah. And Andrew, you mentioned it a moment ago, but the stars, obviously, conventions are very, I think, unique in that they have allowed me to get a lot closer to the people that I see on the silver screen and my TV screen than otherwise I ever would have gotten. And in fact, that's part of the pull, whether you're getting photo ops, autographs. I think, you know, human connection is so wonderful. But even just being able to look at, you know, an actor who sees, you know, the lines can be very long, but just to look at an actor, you have half of 1 second to say, I really loved this thing that you did. That connection there when they say thank you and you're ushered away and you have to pose for a photograph and then leave is still worth it for me. And is still just such a powerful, I guess, exchange, especially because, you know, nothing exists in a vacuum. Like what to get a chance to tell somebody that the thing they made or were a part of changed your life, I'm sure feels very good for them.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to hear you say that actually, because my biggest fear is that fans will pay money to have those experiences, but then they feel like they didn't get their money's worth because it all went by so fast. You know, I know a lot of people freeze up sometimes and stuff like that. And I just, I just like want somebody that is like really looking forward to an experience like that to have it be like the best it can be.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to hear that like, even though it's quick, it still feels like it's enough for you. Like it's, you feel like the human connection going both ways, basically.
Yeah, it's a learned response. Like, especially in photo ops, you know, you really only have a couple of seconds tops, but I tend to direct the shot I'm like, hey, David Tennant, can we do this thing where we do the shoulders and we're back to back? And he's like, yeah, sure, come on. And, that's a few seconds, but it feels more meaningful if you take charge versus just kind of walk up and smile meekly. And even if that's every instinct you have is to just not speak because you can't speak, I think there are ways in which you can get more out of any circumstance, and proper expectations, and also some of that take chargeness, or having a really creative idea. If you're, I've seen actors in the photo op line for other actors taking photos of fans with that actor because they had like this really cool costume idea or something just ridiculous, and they wanted to, like, their fans too is really interesting in some cases. So they want to, you see them be fans of the creativity of the fans that are attending. And it's kind of wild.
I am curious though, Eric, because you've been on both sides of this, what that experience is like, because you just mentioned earlier how, being able to go up to somebody and thank them for something that they've contributed to your life that you've found to be, so interesting enough that maybe you would dress up as somebody from that film or that movie, or you'll want to get a picture with one of these actors or actresses. But then you've also been on the side of it where you've had people come up to you and want to take pictures because you've contributed something to their lives. So I'm just kind of interested what that experience is like. And do you take from having had people come up to you when you go and do some of these conventions?
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, it's funny. I've never yet charged for a photo op or autograph. But you're right. I think some of us may have that experience from the many years of doing the podcast, and it is special. And I think that does inform, kind of having been on the receiving end, it does inform that it feels good. I think though, and also, an aspect of that's really interesting, is you have that shared connection of loving the thing that you're there for, which, doesn't make as much sense in terms of a multi-fandom pop culture convention. But if there's a really specific fan, there was one called X Fest, that's just X-Files, which happened 2 years in a row in Chicago. And, the cast that were there were all there for the X-Files. And that got a lot more into the weeds about what people were grateful for and what people were talking about at those conventions. So it varies greatly, like the level of detail you're able to get into with people. It's kind of neat.
I think meeting some of our listeners has prepared me as well for what the celebrity might be thinking when meeting, say, me or any other fan of something. I think there's a lot of nerves there. And I think celebrities at this point fully understand that a lot of people who will be meeting them are nervous. And it's expected, and it's okay, and it's normal. And I've
seen celebrities coax the kids out, like coax people out of their shell a little bit.
Yeah,
yeah.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson actually just did this on the studio backlot I saw on video the other day. He was talking to this very nervous kid who was a huge fan but didn't want to say anything.
Oh.
So yeah, I think they're well trained, and I think to the fan, even if it's a fleeting moment, even if it's 5 to 10 seconds, they're going to carry that moment forever and, have it run through their head nonstop. And they understand that they're not going to have a lot of time with the celebrity, but even just getting out a few words directly to their face, maybe also getting a photo or an autograph, will stick with them forever. 5 to 10 seconds is enough, I think, because that's also what they know what they're getting into.
And autographs are slower, especially if you're bringing something, that is unusual to an autograph booth. You can have a full-on conversation. Like the lines move a lot slower for the autograph booths as a result of that. That's your real face-to-face opportunity, oftentimes, I'm finding.
So we're going to take a quick break, and once we get back, Eric, I want you to tell us about your love for cosplaying at these conventions. So we'll be right back. Eric, a big aspect of these conventions is people dressing up in cosplay. We've all seen it at all conventions. You love doing this. So what do you like about it most?
We have talked about the creativity and the sharing your passion with others for what it is that you're doing. And I just think cosplay is the greatest thing. I think cosplay is reasonably accessible. It's a great way to show off your passion for something. The more like a big convention is where you can do something really obscure, thinking you're the only person that will know this. And odds are you will find somebody throughout the weekend that also loves that thing.
Yeah.
And it's a high like no other. Essentially, you're putting yourself out there and, seeing what amazing talent others bring. They may go back to their home lives we were talking about earlier than this, to their day jobs, in retail or healthcare or retail. But, at the end of the, you would never expect it from the amount of time they've had to put into, developing a cosplay. And even just, I think people get the memo now, even just a nerd shirt is acceptable over something that is not nerdy.
I think one of the best things about pop culture conventions is seeing the creativity that people have with
unbelievable
cosplay. They put
this
so many hours
the foam
into the stuff
where they
and
shape
money.
it into armor. I can't even imagine. Now with 3D printing, you get air conditioning in the stormtrooper helmets. It's just unbelievable.
Micah, did you say you do cosplay?
I like the nerd shirts, is what I said.
That's Micah's comfort level, is the Kowalski's Bakery kind of t-shirts.
Pam, have you done cosplay?
I never have, but I agree that I think it's really cool. And I have so much respect for people that do it. I have friends that have done cosplay for years, and it, depending on how far you want to take it, it's such a labor of love to see how much time and effort these people, especially the ones that make their own costumes, plan out their own costumes, put into it. I have taken up sewing in the last few years. And honestly, even if you're not sewing for cosplay, I've learned a lot from cosplayers with basically because they're kind of scrappy, and I've learned how to make bodices for dresses and stuff without actually having to go out and buy patterns, because they're all you need is saran wrap and painter's tape. And I'm like, great, I have both of those at my house. I can make my own pattern.
I think I know what trick you're talking about. I love that.
And it's but they'll do that for armor and stuff like that too. And I'm like, this is and it's all free information because there's the community is so nice, and it's all about learning from each other. And it's a beautiful thing.
That cosplay can get competitive, but I don't think it's only competitive in official spaces where they're doing a contest or for money or whatever. I think mostly cosplay is another way of just sharing your love and creativity with the world, which is what we're on this planet for.
And the other thing I will say too is I've never seen a cosplayer say no to stopping to take a photo, which is incredible, because especially at a convention like SDCC, you need all the time you can to get to wherever you're going. And I'm sure it takes them triple the amount of time it takes me to walk from one end of the convention center to the other, because people are stopping and asking for photos. But
and costumes that I wore at conventions first that were never designed to be anything other than convention wear are things like Marty McFly, which I took to LeakyCon this past year. Fun opportunities to source materials a couple months out, and mostly thrifted too. I've made a costume for a LARP before, but I haven't fully created one for a convention. But something like Agent Dale Cooper is a long trench coat and black hairspray and a tape recorder that I found at an old thrift store. So it's very low budget, and yet that whole weekend when I was Agent Dale Cooper, people were shouting from across the room, Constantine, hey Constantine, because they look the same. But I was very happy about that.
And we could probably do a whole episode on cosplay at some point, and we
it's
should.
True.
But
thank you for permission. Let's do
there
that.
You go.
But I will say, I've assisted. I've not.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
but I
Yes.
have helped.
You have.
Helped
yes,
what?
you've helped me put my wig on. You've helped me put the Elvis Dumbledore cape. Is this whole complicated getup where it goes under the outer layer but above the. Anyway, yeah, Mike has been a real ally.
Another great way to participate in cosplay is to Disney bound or Harry Potter bound, and that's a very affordable way to cosplay, and you still get attention. But we could save that for the cosplay episode. Let's talk about some of our coolest convention experiences. Most of mine happened at San Diego Comic-Con. One that will always stick with me is Tom Hiddleston appeared at the Marvel Hall H panel one year, fully in character as Loki, and I believe he was announcing a new Marvel film at the time. This was like the peak Marvel Loki period in MCU history, and just the way the roof was blown off of that Hall H venue was something I will never forget. But speaking of people losing their minds over stars, I saw the cast of the Hunger Games appearing together. I saw the cast of Twilight. I camped out overnight to attend the Twilight panel in 2008 at San Diego Comic-Con. I met SpongeBob one year. I stood in the same room as Harrison Ford. Didn't meet him, just stood in the same room as him. Pam reminded me earlier about a story about a lightsaber. What Pam is referring to is I went to some party at San Diego Comic-Con, and they have tons of great parties there. You got to get invited. That's the tricky part. But I went to one, and I think it was like the 40th anniversary of Star Wars. So earlier in the day, Disney, Lucasfilm, had handed out lightsabers with like a 40th anniversary sticker at the end of their panel. There's a lot of great giveaways at SDCC too. And so I didn't get one of the lightsabers, but at this party later that night, I'm there and I see on a table one of the lightsabers from the day's big giveaway. And I'm like, I was keeping my eye on it for a while. I was like, nobody's grabbing this. What's happening here? Should I take it? And so I thought to myself, well, I don't know, maybe I had a drink or two or three at this point. And I thought, well, I got to sneak it out. So what I did was I took the lightsaber and I put it down the backside of my jeans and put my shirt over top of it too. And that's how I snuck somebody else's lightsaber out of San Diego Comic-Con party.
Did you lose your buttock?
And no, I know it was risky, right? And I still have that lightsaber. So it's not like I threw it away later after I took it from somebody.
At least you still have it.
But really, I felt confident that somebody had left it there and didn't care for it. So it was my job to give the lightsaber a good home. And then also, I mentioned parties. Like, I ran into Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss at one party. Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, the creators, executive producers of Doctor Who and Sherlock. Yeah, and I took a picture with them. And the classic story about that is friend of the show, I say. One of our old friends, Terry Schwartz, I took the picture with her and Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, and the picture is so blurry for some reason. So it's just such a bad photo, but also a great photo because it is blurry.
Well, these days with AI, you might be able to recover some of that.
Good point. But there's a certain charm about the photo being blurry. I don't know if I want to fix it.
Yeah. No,
so those are my
with
stories.
Yeah. No, that all sounds like a good time.
Who ranks higher in terms of meeting them in person, Andrew? Is it SpongeBob or Leah Laporte?
SpongeBob.
You didn't even need the question.
Whatever you're going to ask.
Wow,
it's kind of
Bruce
the dream
out there. Then we would have had a real fight. So I was thinking about the coolest con experiences, and the one that actually came to mind while we were recording this show is the podcast that we did inside the Three Broomsticks in Orlando.
That was cool.
I know it's not necessarily involving celebrities and attending, another big con, but I think that's something cool that, we did together down in Orlando. So that was one. And then we were at Indie PopCon, actually. Eric and I got to spend some time with Christian Nairn, who played Hodor.
Yeah.
We spent quite some time with him at the booth inside of the convention hall where he was doing autographs and photos, but then also got a chance to see him DJ later on. I think it was Saturday night. So that was a very cool experience. But one thing that always sticks out to me, and this was from New York Comic Con, and thanks to Kevin Steck for the ticket for that. I was just walking around, and I guess this is probably common at Comic Cons. Maybe it happens at San Diego Comic Con as well, but there's a procession of Darth Vader and stormtroopers in tow. And all of a sudden, you hear the music, Darth Vader appears. Mind you, now I'm coming up the escalator as they're walking kind of in the hall in front of me, and security all of a sudden pops out and basically creates the path for them to walk. But in doing so, security is blocking the escalator, and you should never block an escalator. It's probably one of the most dangerous things you could possibly do. And so there was a little bit of an incident until we finally convinced the security guard that he needed to move and get out of the way. We didn't really care that Darth Vader was walking by.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there are stormtrooper processions at Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, etc. Those little mini fan parades are always fun.
Honestly, yeah, group cosplay, or when they're everybody who's dressed this way meet in room 220 at 3:00, that kind of stuff is great.
Yeah, but never mess with an escalator.
Oh, clearly Micah is still rocked by that.
Well, no, I mean, it never occurred to me, but the people don't stop coming up just because, there's a security guard right in your way.
Yeah. Pam, how about you?
I think anything that I've ever done in Hall H, like Andrew was saying, the energy is so electric, and it's just so cool to go in there for literally anything that might excite you. I've done Game of Thrones panels in there, Supernatural panels in there, some of the bigger blockbuster movies. There was one year when I think everybody was waiting for the Star Wars panel and camping out, and you could literally just walk into Hall H for, I think, the final Hunger Games movie. And the only reason that it didn't fill up is because everybody was waiting for the Star Wars panel the next day. So stuff like that is just it's just a cool place to be. And then I feel like my entire career is based off of getting to do things for things I'm a fan of. That's literally been half of my MO for my entire career. But one of my favorite moments was getting to cover the Outlander series premiere for season 1. They did this series premiere, the world premiere at Comic-Con at one of the theaters in the downtown area. And yeah, it was just really cool to get to do that because, I had read the books prior, and Laura, one of the former writers on Hypable, was also a big fan. So the two of us tag teamed it. We got to go in and hang out with the cast and see the first couple episodes. And yeah, stuff like that is always really cool too.
And how about you, Eric?
I have 2 stories that spring to mind. The first is when, do we all know who Bruce Campbell is? He's a funny guy. He was in obviously The Evil Dead. He's kind of most well known for. He was doing a game show, a trivia game show. I'm going to quiz you guys here real quick. Called Last Fan Standing, and it was some kind of test audience for this thing. And the audience had basically these remotes that had, because all the questions were multiple choice, or at least at times they could be multiple choice. And essentially, the multiple choice aspect was to elect the greatest fans in the room to be contestants. So they did this, and 4 fans are up on stage. And one of the questions, nothing had been set in the rules about what to do if none of the contestants know the answer to the questions. The question was, what animals do the Pevensey children encounter when they enter Narnia, who give them shelter before St. Nicholas arrives?
Oh, otters.
Yeah. And the contestants did not know Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. And I shouted it out. Yeah, I shouted it out. I gave you that credit there, Pam.
Yeah, you're very sweet.
I think they're legitimately called Mr. Beaver and Mrs. Beaver, which is very funny.
Yeah, I was
but yeah. Anyway, I shouted out the answer. Or actually, no, I just kind of raised my hand Hermione Granger style. Because at this point, the audience was like, man, these contestants don't know it, but they're the best among us. And Bruce Campbell noticed me and he looks at me. He's like, you know this, don't you? And he's like, yeah. And I said, Beavers. And he's like, yeah, it is. And he's like, so what do we do when someone from the audience knows their shit? And he like pulls out his wallet and he gives me $5 from his wallet.
Great. Did you save that $5 bill or did you spend it?
Not only did I save the $5 bill, I can show you, but I then in the autograph line a few hours later paid him for an autograph on one of his headshots. I said, hey, can you write, hey, Eric, keep the change, as if like it wasn't enough money or it was too much money that he gave me. So he wrote. So I have a Bruce Campbell autograph with $5 that came straight from his wallet, unprompted.
I love that. That's awesome.
That's so cool.
Another opportunity at a Star Trek convention was there's a guy named John Paladin who does makeup for when the actors are going to be in character for photo ops as Klingons. And he also will make fan attendees into Klingons. And the night of the big karaoke celebration, I decided to get like done up like a Klingon. So full on, makeup, ridges, everything. And ended up singing Radiohead's Creep to a guest actress that was on, basically plays Lieutenant Worf's baby mama. And I was like, oh, I'm the Klingon love interest that, she said I never had a chance and I'm dejected because you found Worf, da 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 da. And Susie Plaxton was the, I guess like the host or witness of the karaoke. So I just serenaded her on stage in Klingon makeup to Creep.
Speaking of celebrity appearances and, some of the stories we've been sharing, like with Marvel and Twilight, Outlander, etc., a lot of these conventions have become what feels like increasingly corporate. San Diego Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con in particular, they're examples of how studios have started presenting their upcoming slates at these conventions to get some buzz from the most passionate fans. And it makes sense because they announce projects there. The fans there are super passionate, so they start posting like crazy online. I get it all, but it kills some of the charm of what SDCC, NYCC used to be. And it's not like what a lot of the smaller conventions are. So I'm wondering, does a corporate element put a stain on fan conventions?
Yeah, here's my thing about it. It just depends what you go to a convention for. If you want to be physically in the same room when Kevin Feige talks about the next 10 Marvel Studio films, and you want to wait 2 days ahead of time to have the chance to get a seat in that room, and if you're up early in the morning 9 months before the convention in order to secure your place in a lottery that will determine whether you're eligible to get a wristband to be approved for waiting in line for that panel in that room, even though all of it's going to be streamed live on X in the moment, so the whole world finds out the news at the exact same time.
Well, you're stretching some of this. Like, then, I don't think they live stream
corporate conventions are great, Andrew. I love it. I love them so much. I'm sorry, but it's so stressful. I even have a sister in San Diego who lives there. I wouldn't have to deal with the hotel shenanigans and by the way, after I'm done with this sentence, you're all invited to stay with my sister during SDCC, because nobody should have to deal with that hotel shenanigans. That's insane.
Well, don't deal with it by don't going. I think go to San Diego outside of San Diego Comic-Con is the move. Micah, Pam, what do you think? Too corporate or what?
I tend to agree with Eric. I do think it depends why you're going. Like my kind of bulk of experience comes from going to the smaller conventions like the Leaky Cons and the other Potter conferences that we've been to. And those tend to be a lot more intimate. Those tend to be a lot more, you can walk up to pretty much anybody and have a conversation, whether they're somebody who's there to be on a panel or there's somebody who's just attending as a guest. And I just don't think necessarily you have that at some of these larger conventions. That's to be expected. But I think, even hearing from some of the celebrities and some of the guests that go to these smaller conventions, like I think back to last year at LeakyCon when Elijah Wood and Sean Astin were there, like they spoke very favorably of conferences like LeakyCon because of the nature of the conference itself. And, you know, the fact that just how they're treated too. I mean, that also goes a long way. So I do, though, agree with Eric. I think it comes down to why you're going. If you're going for the experience of, you know, learning about, as he said, the next 10 Marvel movies, or to hear from, you know, the entire cast of a particular show, then you know what you're getting yourself into. But I think there's also better opportunities sometimes at some of these smaller conventions that go on.
I mean, I can't say I've been in the same room as Harrison Ford. That's pretty cool. Or Tom Hiddleston as Loki. I'm not joking here. Like, that's actually cool. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing I like about San Diego Comic-Con. It kind of has, in some ways, the best of both worlds. So you can get that Harrison Ford or Loki experience. But you can also go and find plenty of very small vendors selling their own fan art, selling their own crafts, buying, trading, and selling comics. Like, some of that is still there. It's not, and we're all millennials. We don't really know what the earliest San Diego pop culture conventions looked like. But I know that for some people who have been there since maybe the beginning or earlier days, it's a lot different than it used to be. So I've made it a point when I've gone to San Diego Comic-Con in the later half of my SDCC career, I always made it a point to try and visit those smaller vendors who were there. I honestly, for the first few years, I didn't even know they were there. I didn't pay attention to the Artist Alley, I think it's called.
I agree with you, Andrew. I think that the SDCC does have the best of both worlds if you're looking for it. I think it's really easy to get swept up in the pomp and circumstance of these larger panels, but there are a lot of great smaller panels. They have like Book Alley too. That's a great place to go hang out and get some free arcs to read if your thing is sci-fi fantasy fiction. Obviously Artist Alley as well. There's also like so many pop-ups around town too. A lot of them are free. There's mixers too for different subsets of fans that are going on around the city. There's outdoor installations. It's not all celebrities and studios. It just depends on the kind of experience you want to have. But I think because there's kind of a little bit of everything, it's a little bit easier to tailor your experience as long as you have realistic expectations of what all you can do in a day. And I think that like the only downside really is that it's so big that oftentimes it takes you like longer to get to where you're trying to go than like you think it's going to, because there's so many people.
Unless you're Darth Vader, then you can just, you know,
part the Red Sea.
Yeah.
Next time I go to SDCC, I'm just going to stand behind the Darth Vader cosplayer.
I've actually been, I can lend you mine, Pam. I actually have been Darth Vader at
I just want to walk behind you. So you could dress as Darth Vader, then I'll just walk behind you.
It was Darth Vader. I had a tray table with blue milk on it. And it was real fun.
Well, one thing that I just kind of find interesting as we're having this conversation is that we've all kind of approached conventions in different ways. Like sometimes we've been media, sometimes we've been panelists, sometimes we've been fans. So it's kind of an interesting perspective to have.
Yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we get towards the end of this discussion, I want to talk about celebrity autographs and photo ops for a price. But first, we need to make a little money ourselves, so we'll be right back. So something that I want to touch on are celebrity autographs and photo ops at these pop culture conventions. They haven't always sat right with me. If you look at any pop culture convention, you will see that there are celebrity signing and photo opportunities. You see a lot of this with Star Trek. Even William Shatner is still on the convention circuit. You see a lot of this with The Walking Dead, a lot of other big comic to TV adaptations and sci-fi adaptations. Those stars are all on the convention circuits. And I just look at their prices sometimes and I'm like, man, I don't know. It doesn't feel right to charge that price for such a quick moment. Now, people are paying it, so the price must be right if they are paying it. But it still doesn't feel right to me. It feels like they're being preyed upon.
Yeah, there was this great article that came out a few years ago. I just Googled it. It came out in 2016. It was out of the Hollywood Reporter, and the title is Stars Getting Rich Off Fan Conventions, How to Take Home, quote, Garbage Bags Full of 20s. And this article, I remember it coming out, and this was around the time when it started becoming kind of cool to be one of these bigger actors that did show up to conventions for, to charge for autographs and pictures, because I think back in the day, like, before you started seeing say the Marvel crew showing up to do these photo ops and autograph signings, it was really where like careers were going to die. It was kind of like the equivalent of like the Vegas residency when like Elvis was the Vegas residency.
God.
But now it's like, it's way different. And this article is insane. Like there's a part here where it says that Stephen Amell, who used to star in the CW's Arrow, will walk away with as much as $250,000 a weekend, which is more than what he makes per episode, or what he was making per episode of Arrow. So it's very lucrative. And so I think that you just have to take that into account. I'm not saying that you need to be like bitter about it, but I think you just need to like know that like this is like a source of income for these people. And if you're fine with like paying and knowing that like it's not like the most genuine interaction you can have, but like that's not to say there isn't some kind of like genuine interaction you can walk away with. It's fine, right? It's like a trade. You're trading goods. It's kind of like when you go to a concert, right? Like I think about it like I paid $300 to go see Taylor Swift. She played for 3 hours. I basically paid $100 an hour to watch her perform, and I'm fine with that.
Worth it,
right? Exactly. Time of my life.
I just don't like when fans may feel like they're being priced out. I don't have an issue with being
that's
charged
another thing too. Yeah,
that's happened.
A photo or for an autograph. I think, that's totally fine. But I've seen instances where it's a little bit egregious. And like you're saying, Pam, like to walk away from a fan convention with $250,000 for the weekend, that's pretty damn good.
And that's for a TV actor. No shade to Stephen Amell and the CW, but that's not even for like, Chris Evans, Captain America. So how much must he be bringing in?
And that's cash money too. That's not taxed either. That's stuff that they collect at the booth.
They're supposed to be reporting it, are they?
Which is actually, I'll send you guys this article later. Maybe we could link to it in the show notes. Like, it's a point of contention too, because like they go around agent fees basically.
Oh, okay. So the agents hate it.
Yeah, the agents hate it.
I agree in general that pricing can be predatory. But it turns out, in just thinking about this and prepping for this episode, I realized where I've been spending my money all these years. I literally texted Meg. I said, me to St. Peter at the pearly gates. St. Peter, why did I never have money in my life? And St. Peter replies, oh, and it's a screenshot of this. Celebrities I've gotten photos with and or autographs include Jack Quaid, Tawny Newsome, Gates McFadden, Patrick Stewart, Brent Spiner, Marina Sirtis, Michael Dorn, LeVar Burton, Will Wheaton, William Shatner, Kate Mulgrew, Robert Picardo, Garrett Wang, Jerry Ryan, Robert Beltran, John Delancey, that's just Star Trek people, Christopher Lloyd, Charlie Cox, Alfie Allen, Stan Lee, Carrie Elwes, Catherine Tate, David Tennant, Peter Davison, Janet Fielding, Sarah Sutton, Mark Strickson, Caitlin Blackwood, Tony Curran, John Barrowman, Willow Shields, Catherine Mary Stewart, Bruce Campbell, and does not include any Harry Potter actors I've met at conventions.
Can I ask you, Eric, like, how do you like just set aside a certain amount of money that you're willing to spend for like autographs and photos at each convention? Or do you like plan ahead and say, I'm only interested in meeting like these 3 people at this thing because they mean something to me? Like, how do you justify
It's a great
budget?
question. The morning of convention day, I log into my bank and I see
you do some girl math,
and I see what my cash advance limit is. My daily cash advance.
Talk about preying on people. This is exactly what we're talking about.
The high interest rate And that is my absolute minimum spending cash.
You're
for the
joking,
day.
right? You don't actually take a
Of
cash
course,
advance.
I'm
Okay.
joking, but
You know what? Some people probably do, though. Some
I
people
will-
probably
yeah.
do. They say, "Oh, I can't wait to meet the voice of Mario at
Yes.
Rhode Island Comic Con."
Is it Charles Martinet?
Right. So I'm going to go and spend
Ridiculous amounts of.
I'm going to go and spend $85 to spend 5 seconds with this
Yeah.
guy to take a photo, and nobody will know who I'm taking a picture with
Look,
because
yeah,
he's the
right.
voice of Mario, not
Right.
Mario.
Right. Well, that's why they do things like booth recordings. They'll record a voicemail for you now, as their character, if they're a voiceover actor. No, I will say, Pam, in answer to your question, like maybe once or twice I've had to look into cash advances, but for the most part,
No.
I'm serious. I've actually, it's not me every day though. I lied about it being me every day.
Okay.
Sometimes, so I had a Star Trek poster, and you get Patrick Stewart to sign your Star Trek poster, and that's totally amazing. And he would be like the first guy I'd go to because he's Sir Patrick Stewart. But then you see that some of the other Star Trek cast are also, signing, or ones that are not in attendance one year will be in attendance the next year. You've already got the signed poster, but it's missing a few autographs. It can become, you can strategically plan which conventions you attend based on who's going to be there in the effort of like completing, essentially. Like I completed my Star Trek poster of the Enterprise with the signature of John Delancey, who had just not made it to Chicago for many years that I was doing it. So I do tend to think ahead, and there are conventions I went to just for like seeing one person, like Carrie Ellis, for instance. I wore my Robin Hood outfit just to see him. I only got a day pass because otherwise I didn't take off that weekend. I stayed for 3 hours, met Carrie, and left. And that ended up being very affordable for me because it wasn't a whole weekend affair. There was no hotel, there was no.
Yeah,
and-
that's one
yeah.
thing we haven't even really brought up, the travel expenses that can be associated with these.
Yeah, even when you're traveling to a con in the same city as you, it can be very pricey. I know
parking
all the
alone.
places to park around Rosemont, and stuff. But so I will say it's strategic based on what you want, and then very little impulse buying.
Okay.
Very little impulse buying moment of.
I mean, that's good to know for Eric. But
Yeah.
I have a sense that for some people it is just impulse buying.
Oh, yeah. You get excited.
Yeah.
It just sounds like you really need a budget at the end of the day if you're going
Yeah.
to do. It's just like any other trip that you would plan to go on, right? Like
Sure.
when you're talking about hotel, travel, meals.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eric's like skipping meals so he can get a photo with Bill Shatner and then calling up the bank for a cash
I
advance.
actually, that one was pretty steep.
I am looking on the New York Comic Con website right now, just at random actors and actresses that are making appearances this weekend. And I think the highest autograph right now is Orlando Bloom, which is at $210, photo for $180. And this is always
For 5
cash,
seconds.
right? Like do they, or do you
Where
pay in
is it?
advance?
Yeah,
You
it's
can
usually
pay in
cash.
advance.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes if it's ticketed, you can get it through the card and things. But here's another story kind of like that. When I met Christopher Lloyd, his photo ops were going for, say, $90, and his autographs were like, so let's say $110. For $130, you could get a private meet and greet with him. For up to 10 people could get this meet and greet for $130. And I said, well, I'm going to meet him, actually be in a room with him for like 45
You could
minutes
get a
of
photo.
conversation.
And an
You can
autograph.
get a photo, you can get an autograph, and it wasn't that much more money. And it turned out, because this was a very small Trek convention in Chicago, only 2 people signed up for the meet and greet.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I
That's
was
a good hack.
literally in a room with Christopher Lloyd. Like, he gave me his AOL address afterwards.
Thank you for being one of 2 people.
Thank you for being one of, but like, there are opportunities here. There are ways in which, again, getting back to human connection, I really want to pound this in. Like, there are really wonderful moments, and I'm not too cynical to believe it's all fake or they are performing a service. You shouldn't be naive about it, but I feel as though I've been able to successfully communicate to people how much the things they have been in have meant to me. And that's why I love and still will do conventions.
Yeah. Family plans come through again. Nice little group split to save money and get some more benefits. Yeah. So to anyone thinking of attending a convention, maybe it's their first convention, what tips do we have for them? We assembled a little list here for everybody. First of all, wear deodorant, like I said. Put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to talk to fellow fans who seemingly share the same passions as you. You will have an instant connection, and I dare say, a great conversation with any stranger you meet there, if you know they're a fellow fan of something. Bring a phone charger. Definitely need those. Your phone's going to have bad reception because there's a lot of phones around, and it's going to chew into your battery, and you're going to be taking pictures and stuff. Get there early. Wander around the show floor. There's so much to explore. Like I said, the Artist Alley, so much fun. And support the indie creators too. That's really important. This next one, Pam, was this you?
Yeah. I said specifically for San Diego Comic-Con, but you made a good point that if it's a major pop culture convention, this tip stands. You should set realistic expectations, especially if you want to do any of like the bigger studio panels. Pick one thing or panel you want to do absolutely every day and focus on doing that. I know it looks like you're going to have time to do both, but you probably won't because of lines and stuff like that. So don't overpack your schedule, and that way you won't be disappointed.
Water and snacks, very important. Make sure you're hydrating yourself throughout the day. Make sure you just pack some snacks to have in your backpack or your pockets. And those lines in the convention hall, especially for food, can get very long. So if you're able to bring things in, I know some restrictions in certain conventions, make sure that you do bring some stuff with you because it'll go a long way.
And the other reason snacks is a good call is because the concession stands at these conventions is a lot of money. That could be a ticket to meet an actor from Blue's Clues instead of on a bad slice of pizza.
It's just like food court food too. So it's not even that great. You're paying for like an overpriced hot dog.
Yeah. And Eric, bring us home.
Yeah. So see if there's an app is my next big tip, because some of these convention centers, especially now with technology, one thing that I love doing at conventions is if it's on sked.org, as in schedule, you can pre-plan and see what times each of the discussion and panels are. Oftentimes they'll have Q&As with some of the celebrities that are completely free to attend with the price of admission. Other than autographs and photo ops, you actually get to ask your question and have an interaction that way. So that's a great opportunity. So just see if there is an app. If there's not an app, if it's a printout of a book, I don't know what year you've time traveled to, but same thing, highlight, write it, earmark, dog ear the page.
Enter with the plan. Yeah.
And in general, don't overdo it. I mean, I think tips like hydrate and sleep and all this other stuff is really crucial. Prepare for the weather. If it's summertime, if it's wintertime, no matter what, make sure. And if you are doing cosplay, figure out if it really is like climate appropriate and how to account for that. Give yourself like build-in breaks.
Did you say this? That also convention centers tend to be very cold.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yes.
Bring a sweater.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Or a jacket. I brought a jacket to podcast movement when we
I think
went
that's
there.
Why I've always gotten
summer.
sick after conventions, because you're going from hot to cold,
Yeah.
and then by the time you get home, it's like I feel gross.
I get cold so easily. I always bring a jacket to these convention centers. All right. Well, that is our discussion for now on pop culture conventions. This was a lot of fun. Listeners, let us know what you think about pop culture conventions and any other feedback you might have about today's chat. Don't forget to follow us in your favorite podcast and social media apps. Leave us a review and comment. We will read it all. And that is the hype around pop culture conventions. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.